So before we dive into creating our own storyboards and directing our film, it's helpful to have a basic understanding of the language used to describe camera movements and shot framing so that you can better understand what you're seeing in other films, come up with ideas of what you want to do with your own, and communicate to one another, to your teachers or to project leads or to your partners or the people who are going to help you on your film, how you are shooting your film. So in this case, in this video, we are going to be focusing on the size of the shot and a few camera angles. We'll have a video later on when we get closer to layout that will talk about camera movement. But for now, just to get into storyboarding, we're just focusing more on placement of the camera and the positioning of the camera relative to the characters. So the first uh, shot size that we're going to talk about is the furthest away shot, and that's the establishing shot. So establishing shot is a shot that sets a geographic location for the coming scenes in the film. And so usually this is really, really far away, and you're looking at the landscape or a building or a landmark that gives the viewer an idea of where we are in space and time. So these shots are really important because it helps us ground the viewer in time and space as the film progresses, especially for changing locations in the film. In this case, or in this example on the right-hand side, we have Hogwarts in one of the Harry Potter movies. And so because we're transitioning probably from the train station and we're about to spend the rest of the film at Hogwarts, it helps to have a view of what Hogwarts looks like on the outside, right? So we get the idea that it's this big looming castle perched on these rocks, right? And so it gives a very uh, dramatic entrance to this space, right? It's very moody and has a lot of grandeur to it. And so not only are we seeing where we're about to be, but it also serves the purpose of letting the viewer know as the students in the film, or as students of the film will know as well, what kind of place Hogwarts might be. Because this is really far away, we sometimes also call this an extreme long shot. So usually when we say extreme, that means the furthest or the most, the extreme. And so long means the furthest away. Here's an establishing shot from Skyfall. And so we're getting the outside view of James Bond's ancestral home. And we also see in this shot his car. And so when we're shown this shot in the film, this establishing shot, we know exactly where we're going to be. We're going to be in this old stone building in the middle of Scotland or Wales. I can't remember where his home's in. And we also know, oh, James Bond's here and he's arrived. So it's easy for us to jump in and understand where we are before just magically starting the film in the middle of this building. Here's an example from one of the Lord of the Rings movies. So here's Gandalf cresting a hill and seeing either Osgiliath or Minas Tirith, I can't remember, one of those Gondor cities for the first time. He doesn't see it for the first time. It's the first time we're shown it in the film. And it, again, just like the other ones, it's going to show us this really interesting place we're about to be in, especially seeing from far away the multi-layered kind of structuring of the city. It's a very tall city with the palace being on top. And so this gives us a great introduction to where we're about to be and spend a good portion of the film at. The next shot, and I'm going in levels of getting closer to the characters. So we're starting from far, far, far away, and then we're getting closer, 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 closer. So a wide shot, or sometimes called a long shot, called a long shot because it's far away, or a wide shot because it captures a wide field of view or a wide area of view. Um, Sets the local scene. So this is where we're showing the characters in their local environment. So in this case, in Stranger Things, we're showing the kids playing Dungeons and Dragons in the basement, right? So if we might have like an establishing shot early on, or we might even come straight to this shot, but showing this context before we get close up on their faces gives us insight into where they're at. Oh, they're in their parents' basement playing board games or Dungeons and Dragons. So it's really important to see this to understand how the characters relate to one another in space and how they relate to their environment. And we also, especially if we're going to be doing action like following characters around close up inside of scene, this also gives us an idea of what the space looks like so that when we're following them along, we're not feeling like we're lost, right? We don't need to know the details and the specifics of the room, but it'll help us not feel like we're totally lost. Sometimes this is also called a master shot. So wide shot, long shot, or master shot. Here's one from Taxi Driver. Travis Bickle showing him alone inside of the cafe, right? But it's showing him in relationship to all these other people who are kind of in their own worlds or not paying attention to him, and him kind of isolated like this, right? The Martian. Um, you could consider this an establishing shot if the purpose was to show the environment specifically, but in this case, it's focusing on his relationship to the environment, showing that he's, in the middle of the desert of the Mars. There's north by northwest, right? This would be a wide or long shot, right? Because it's showing this strange space between the characters and showing them that they're so far apart before we get up close on their faces and hear them talking. And here's a shot from 7. And again, this is like this shot's interesting because we're seeing it's a cramped space, so we kind of have to be pulled back. We can't really show a wide shot in that space very successfully because it's so cramped. But it also is kind of like framing them, and it feels like we're kind of like voyeurs. We're like hiding in the shadows watching them. Okay, the next shots that we're going to talk about, shot sizes, go into or are defined by where they hit the character at or where they crop the character at with the camera frame. Okay, so all of these are related to how much of the character is visible in the frame, and this is when we're getting specific or close up on a single character, or sometimes two. Um, so full shot goes has a whole character. Medium long shot cuts them off around the legs. Medium shot cuts them off around the waist, and then medium close and close up starts cutting into their chest. And then so a close up essentially is where we're starting to frame their head, and extreme close ups where we're just looking almost pretty much at their eyes and a few facial features. So the full shot's kind of like the wide shot, in that we want to see the environment, we want to see the relationship of the character to other characters, where they might be moving. It gives us a lot of space for action, but we're really focusing on a single person. And not it doesn't necessarily have to be a single person, but we're really starting to focus on character and less on environment or the space they're in. So here's Guardians of the Galaxy, right? So this is a full shot with 5 characters. Here's the boy in the striped pajamas. The full shot also makes it easy for us to track and follow these characters who are moving quickly in the frame, right? If it was close up, the camera would have to move really quickly. So medium shots start to cut us off at the waist up, and then we have variations of that above and below the waist. So full shot is full body, medium shot is cutting around the waist. So a medium long shot will cut them off closer to the knee, so a little bit below the waist. So somewhere between a medium and a long shot or a full shot. A medium shot cuts off around the belly button or the waist, and the medium close shot starts to cut us off around the armpits or the nipples, right? The medium shot, when we're getting in closer from the full shot, we're starting to look at the character's emotions and acting and focus on that. We're starting to cut away the environment, so we want less information about what's going on around them, or we want to focus the audience to focus less about where they are and more about what's going on in their thought process or what they're saying. And so these are usually more human and personal shots, and also pretty common in dialogue and comedy shots. This was also coined the term cowboy shot. So cowboy shot's a medium long shot, right? So it cuts them off around the thighs. And the reason why is because in a lot of Western films and cowboy flicks, we wanted to see the characters' guns in their holster for certain shots. And so the cameras were purposely shot and placed in certain frames, a certain way so that the framing would cut them off, just so that you could see the gun still. Here's a medium long shot from Zero Dark 30, right? Again, focusing on character, background's completely blurred out. We were starting to get into her thought process. Cool halo around her head. Here's a medium shot, right? Cutting them off around the belly button from True Grit, right? Very typical dialogue, interaction kind of shot. Here's another medium shot, or maybe it might be closer to a medium long shot from the King's Speech, showing this interaction between these 3 characters. Here's a medium close shot. So it's not uncommon to get a close and personal shot but have multiple characters. It's less common, but it's not unheard of, from O Brother Where Art Thou. Here's another shot from O Brother Where Art Thou, another medium close shot. 2 characters kind of talking to each other, right? We're not thinking about the movie theater, we're just thinking about their conversation. And here's another medium close shot, showing an interesting composition, showing the environment, because this is relevant to what he's talking about, escaping from their chain gang, but getting in close on his reaction in his face. I'm not going to show this video, but I recommend you guys watch it. It has interesting kind of compositions. It's from a clip from Catch Me If You Can, so you can find it in the downloadable PDF that's linked to this or below this video. And so in Catch Me If You Can, the shot starts with a wide shot, and then it gets closer and closer to a full and medium long shot to cut in on the characters. So medium close shot captures the figure from about the chest up. A close-up shot fills the entire frame with the subject, usually just their face. And this is where we're really starting to focus on like heightened character emotions, right? This is where it gets a little bit dramatic. And then extreme close-up is really on very specific parts of a body, usually the eyes. And this is either it's meant to show a little detail or it's meant to show a exaggerated emotion, right? In this case, we're getting like this kind of cowboy standoff, eyes searching shot from Kill Bill. So here's a close shot from the master, right? So a very intimate kind of feeling shot. I mean, it doesn't help that Amy Adams is looking straight into the camera, but it feels very intimate and personal. And it's because we're getting in that close personal bubble space that we're not used to seeing people in on a casual basis. Okay, here's another example from Shaun of the Dead. So this close-up shot really starts to blur away and erase the details of the environment. And this is used to great effect in the scene. If you guys go and watch this movie, he's kind of in a daze. And so everything sort of goes out of focus and he loses touch with reality. And so this close up, erasing all the details around him, is really effective with this camera angle. Right. Classic example from Silence of the Lambs. Right. We have Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. And we get this close visual connection of them both looking straight into the camera. And in this case, it's supposed to feel like they're looking at each other, but we're also being put into the point of view of the characters, so that we feel the creepy stare from Hannibal Lecter and the defiant stare back from Jodie Foster's I can't remember what her Agent Starling. Extreme close up with some exaggerated camera angle lens, right? So using a wider lens, which we're not really talking about in this lecture, to kind of distort perspective, right? So it feels a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more intense to heighten the emotion. In this case, we have an extreme close up, right? Focusing on the eyes. A lot of times this is used kind of really to punctuate emotion. Sometimes it's used to make a stylistic kind of shot or cut. In this case, it's supposed to kind of push us into the mind of the character, right? We see her watching TV, we see the reflection of the TV on her glasses, and so we make that mental leap or that connection of her mental processes connecting to what she's looking at. So especially when this is paired with another shot of what they're actually looking at, it really gives you the idea that this person's focusing on whatever that is that they were watching in the previous shot. I'm not going to play this, but please check out the video link. It's a really weird thumbnail. It's a weird clip from The Big Lebowski. In this case, the close-up and detail shots, I didn't really describe these before, but close-up shots that aren't on a character's features are sometimes called detail shots or insert shots. And so seeing that close, in this case, this scene is introducing a new character. We don't see them completely. We see them in the details. So we see close-up shots of their fingernails. We see close-up shots of their tongue on the ball. We see close-up shots of their shoes and their clothes. And it's supposed to kind of give you like a little teasing of who this person's about to be before their reveal. And here's another detailed close-up shot from Black Swan. So this is extreme close-up. Extreme close-up, showing these feathers that she's pulling from her skin. And here's one from Toy Story, extreme close up on the detail of that brush stroke and that paint texture, blowing away Andy's memories. So talking about shot angles, we were talking about shot angle, sometimes used interchangeably, but really we were talking about framing and distance. Now we're talking about where the camera is placed height-wise and the angle it's at. So eye level shot is a normal shot. This is a shot that you'll see used most of the time. And this is for stable moments or moments that aren't supposed to be particularly dramatic in one way or another. It's usually at the character's eye level. So all these characters' eye levels are kind of at the same level as the camera, right? We're not above the person and we're not down below them. It feels like our camera is placed at their same head level, which is shorter than a normal human. And so we're focusing on just relating to the characters. This is also called the neutral shot. So used in the majority of scenes, probably in most films, and definitely when we want to relate to the character, connect to the character on an emotional level. The next type of shot is a low angle shot, and this is where we are lower than the character or the subject matter and we're pointing up towards them. So it sounds kind of confusing because you might think low angle means that you're tilting the camera to a lower angle, but really means the camera is low and we're angled up. So we're tilted up to look at the subject. This creates like a power dynamic, right? Where the person we're looking up to usually, if there's another subject in the camera or in the film, they feel that character who's up higher and we're looking up at feels more powerful. Sometimes it's also called an upshot, which probably is easier to understand and feels a little bit more descriptive. An extreme version of this would be a worm's eye view. That's where you're like on the ground and you're really looking up like you're an ant or something like that, or a worm in the dirt. So here's some examples. This is a really subtle upshot, right? So we're below Meredith and the camera's tilted up to look at her. And so Meredith, Merida, she feels like a hero, right? She looks like a hero. She feels more powerful. She feels in control. Here's a really stylistic one from, I think, not Snatch, probably Snatch. And so this really exaggerated uh, upshot creates this really dynamic power dynamic between Bullet Tooth Tony or whatever his name is and this guy who's got a gun pointed to his head. Okay, very subtle, but we're down at Buddy's level, and Mr. Incredible is much larger and much more powerful and prominent. So that subtle play of where we're at with the camera and looking up at characters is establishing like a hierarchy between their power in this. A high angle shot would be the opposite. So this is where we're above the characters looking down at them and the camera is tilted down. So this would be also be called a down shot. So in this case, what we're looking down on typically is supposed to be shown as being weaker. So Incredibles, again, Mr. Incredibles in this case, because we're up higher looking down on him, he also feels like he's beneath us or he's somehow losing his power or powerless. So extreme version of this would be when we're up really, really high looking down, and that's a bird's eye view, as if you're at a bird's level. So here's a down shot of Harry Potter, right? So in this case, he's fallen to the ground conveniently so that it feels like we're about to like come up on him and like grab him like a Dementor. Here's from Blade Runner. Here's an example of a very subtle down shot, right? So we're above Ryan Gosling, looking down on him because he's kind of in a moment of weakness and he's not in control. This case, Emma Stone's not necessarily supposed to feel powerless. It's supposed to kind of show her looking up into the sky. And so we want to see that connection of her eyes and see what she's like, kind of feel like we're sharing that moment with her because she's looking up at the sky at her father flying away. It's convenient for us to be higher looking down on her. In this case, again, we have a similar to Buddy and Mr. Incredible. In this case, it's not meant to be a power dynamic issue necessarily. It's not supposed to show that these characters are, you know, necessarily, one's more powerful than the other, but it's just a interesting or fun interplay between their height differences as a couple and as characters. Here we have the same argument between two characters, and we actually start off at a level where Mr. Incredible, just due to his height, is larger, and also in the argument, he has a little bit of like stronger ground at the beginning, but she literally uses her superpowers to get larger than him, and he becomes weaker and more feeble as she starts to dominate the conversation. So that start off that as a down shot, and then it moves into an upshot. And so when the down shot, she's a little bit lower, and then the upshot, she's gained the higher ground. Same issue here, right? We have a weaker, physically weaker character and a more timid character story-wise compared to this cop who's this giant, apex animal, and so she feels very helpless. So in this case, we've been talking about tilting the camera. So for the most part, the camera's just been moving up and down, moving left and right. Tilting the camera is when we're looking up and down, right? Like nodding your head. Rolling the camera would be something like you're touching your ear to your shoulders, right? And so normally a camera isn't rolling at all, but as soon as you start to tilt the camera, then you're rolling it as if you're, again, rotating your head to touch your ears to your elbow or shoulders. So this leads us to the Dutch angle shot. And so most shots are just neutral shots, but a Dutch angle shot is where that camera is now being rolled, right? And what the effect it has is that horizontal and vertical lines that exist in our world, like the horizon or just the walls in a room, all of a sudden are no longer vertical or horizontal, they're diagonal. And this creates a sense of instability, as if, if someone was pushing you back or pushing you over in a chair, all of a sudden everything's starting to go off kilter. You get that same sense when you see a movie where the camera angle starts to become, another word for this is canted, but a Dutch angle shot. All the angles in this space that were used to being as stable are no longer stable, and we feel a sense of unease and tension or dynamic. It just becomes dynamic. So here's Die Hard, very subtle. These are starting to go um, diagonal, and that's because we're getting a moment where the bad guy's about to get an upper hand, so it feels tense and dangerous. Here's another Bruce Willis movie, 12 Monkeys. He's in an insane asylum, so literally it feels like he's kind of going crazy. He doesn't feel comfortable, and we're not supposed to feel comfortable either. And that's why the camera has a Dutch angle. Here's Inception, a very dizzying kind of dramatic, stylistic action sequence, but things always feel like they're moving forward really quickly. So especially in action sequences, it's not uncommon for you to have Dutch angle. This is an extreme example. Just from Do the Right Thing. So these are very tense moments, and that was from the example from earlier between characters, and so there's a lot of tension in the air, and so this is a pretty extreme Dutch angle where we're just like pushed off kind of balance, and we're really left feeling uncertain of what's about to happen. Okay. This isn't necessarily a shot angle, but it's kind of like a relationship between characters and the placement of the camera. And we've seen these a lot, and these are types of shots that you guys are all familiar with. But it's helpful to have this terminology, and that is a shoulder shot. Shoulder shot is a shot that is placed behind one character and looking past them at something else, usually another character. It doesn't always have to be the shoulder, but we usually call it the shoulder shot or the over the shoulder shot. Sometimes it's at their elbow, sometimes it's right by their ear. It doesn't really matter that much. So usually this is used in conversation between characters. Sometimes there's not a character, maybe there's a thing like Indiana Jones looking at like a golden idol. The idea is that you're trying to make a connection between one character and what they're looking at. And so in dialogue scenes, we're trying to get the context of two characters interacting with each other. And so when we're looking over one character's shoulder, we're trying to see it kind of a little bit from their point of view. It's like we're getting in on the conversation. The pairing between shots, these are usually paired with something called a shot reverse. And a shot reverse is the companion shot looking from the other direction, right? And so usually if I'm this woman talking to Sacha Baron Cohen, right? And then it's her turn to have a dialogue and I want to see it from Sacha Baron Cohen's point of view, then this would be the over the shoulder shot, and then the shot reverse would be the paired shot that comes after it. So here's one from Alien. In this case, both characters aren't necessarily in the first shot. It's not really over shoulder shot, really just focusing on Ripley. And then we look up at this actor whose name I don't remember. We get an over the shoulder shot. And again, it's not necessarily over the shoulder, but we get Ripley somehow in the frame. So we build that context or that connection between them of their conversation. Again, not going to play these videos during this lecture, but I encourage you guys to go watch them. So pause it now if you want to come to it. This one is probably a very standard over the shoulder conversation shot sequence. I think it doesn't even break the over the shoulders. Maybe it does once or twice, but it's used to great effect. It's just literally a conversation that's just between these two characters, and there's a lot of tension in the sequence of what they're talking about, and this guy relating to Anton, the bad guy. So we always have a little bit of Anton or this poor man in the shot, depending on no matter what shot, who we're looking at, we see a little bit of the other actor to keep that connection between them. And there's another great example. I'm not going to play it, but I recommend you guys watch these for examples from The Godfather and notice and watch how when the characters are shown in shot together. So I'm looking over the shoulder of one character, looking at another one, and when you're focusing on just one character. So this lecture will continue in a couple weeks when we start talking about layout. And in that situation, we'll start talking about more camera properties, including the movement of the camera and the lens properties like depth of field and wide angle and wide angle lenses and long lenses, which will be much more relevant to layout than it is right now to storyboarding.